Welcome back. All right. Teams 1 through 32, power rankings. We have 3 more of these left, so we'll have one next Saturday, the Saturday after, and then I'm going to do one on the Friday that follows the end of the regular season and is right before the playoffs. And then that'll be it for the power rankings for another year. This is week 24, so we're going to have 27 power rankings this year, which is one more than last year. That being said, let's go ahead and start at number 32, and that is Chicago. The Blackhawks are running out the string at this point, and the good news being that they've got some young players coming into the lineup. I'm looking forward to seeing Rinzel and Moore join the team tomorrow and seeing what they're able to do, because Chicago's at home against Utah, so that should be a fun game to watch. But yeah, both of those teams, their seasons are done, and for Chicago, it's been done for a while. But now we start to see what the future is going to look like for them. Number 31, dropping 3 spots from last week, the Bruins. It's been a miserable run towards the bottom for the Boston Bruins. I don't think Boston's ever been 31 on the board before. I don't think that's the thing, but they've been awful. There's no way to sugarcoat it. The Boston Bruins have been just terrible. This road trip they just finished, yeah, they didn't win a game on that road trip, and they didn't look good in any of the games on that road trip. So Boston drops 3 spots this week. So moving up 1 spot from last week, San Jose. Yep, the Sharks move up 1 spot. They did get that shootout win over Toronto. So, I mean, they did have a lead in that game against Toronto too. They blew that lead, but they got the 2 points, which to me puts them ahead of Boston on the board. Basically, I was looking at the power rankings board tonight, and I was like, yeah, Boston belongs 31st. It's what, like, because people always ask, like, well, how do you weight this? And do you weight, like, goal differential? And do you worry about, like, the strength of schedule? And do you balance it out with, what about all the analytics? No, I just look at a board. I've got all the logos on the board, and I go by everything I've watched, and I say, I think this team's outplaying that one right now. That is the only consideration. And every night, I update the power rankings board, and in the morning, I double check to make sure I've updated said power rankings board. Every now and then, there's a game or two that might get missed. Usually the 7 o'clock starts, and I make sure it's all updated. But that's it. So yeah, San Jose number 30 this week. Number 29, dropping 2 spots from last week, Nashville. Playing out the string. And honestly, at this time of year, there's part of me that thinks that I could just drop the bottom row. But I know from having done NFL power rankings years back, that when I wanted to drop the teams that were out of the running, I was told, you can't do that. Still, it's power ranks. You got to power rank everything. So Nashville drops a couple of spots. And for Nashville, they are playing out the string. They're mathematically eliminated, and it is difficult for players to get up for those games. Andrew Burnett expressing his frustration. He didn't say he didn't want to coach them through it, though. Number 28, and moving up 2 spots from last week, Buffalo. Buffalo Sabres, decent week. The interesting thing with Buffalo is that they're playing all right, but they haven't hurt their draft lottery position with the way they're playing. They have not moved up in the standings. They've been close, but they haven't moved up in the standings as of yet. At least I don't think they have. I'm trying to think now, like Seattle's fallen off. I mean, there's the chance Buffalo hurts their draft lottery position, but at this point in time, Buffalo's not really worried so much about adding more prospects. It's about adding players this summer that can make the team better. So they've had a pretty decent run overall. Number 27, moving up, and I mean recently, moving up 2 spots from last week, the Flyers. The John Tortorella effect. So they win a couple of games. Yes, over Buffalo, and they also won over Montreal. So it's not like they beat like heavy hitters. But still, Philadelphia scored 13 goals. All of a sudden, these guys that I know are good offensive players are starting to put the puck in the net. So between now and the end of the season, they may salvage some of their point totals and goal totals, and there might be a bright future for Philadelphia. The one thing they have to worry about this summer is simple. Goaltending. You have to have a good starter. The backup can be good to, middle of the pack, but you have to have a good starter, and that's the first thing that Danny Briere needs to, I think, accomplish this summer, is finding that goaltender. It's likely going to have to be via trade. I don't know where they're going to get that goaltender from, but they need to get that figured out. Number 26, same spot as last week, Seattle. Seattle's playing out the string, much like the rest of these teams. I debated about whether or not to put Seattle behind Philadelphia or Buffalo, and I thought, Seattle's in the right spot. So, Seattle 26th. I thought they deserved maybe a better fate against Dallas, but Dallas has just been winning all these games that they don't really play all that well in. And Seattle's the latest victim of this new style of hockey that Dallas is playing that really confuses me. That had better not be the playoff strategy against the Avalanche, their most likely opponent. Number 25, and moving down one spot from last week, Pittsburgh. The Penguins, the good run they had going on has kind of fallen apart. Of course, Crosby gets his 20th season of point per game or higher, and that's a new NHL record, so kudos to him for that, but that's pretty much the happiness in Pittsburgh. The interesting thing is Jari gets sent down to the AHL, he comes up, he's playing better, and then all of a sudden he gets pulled back-to-back games this week, and we're back to asking questions about goaltending in Pittsburgh. And of course, once the regular season's done, I will do videos on teams that miss the playoffs, and I guarantee you some of these teams we're going to be talking about, the goaltending's really been an issue, or defense and the goaltending. So moving into the next row, number 24, dropping 2 spots from last week, Detroit. The Wings are still in contention for a playoff spot because that chase in the East has turned into a turtle derby. And Detroit, there's a chance. I don't see them making it, but is there a chance? There is. I don't think there's much of a chance, but it's still there. So Detroit's number 24 this week. Number 23, same spot as last week, Anaheim. The Ducks playing well enough. They're for 500 on the season. And I think that should be the goal for the end of the season, is to try to maintain that and have, an 82-point record. And then next season they can look to get to a winning record and get closer to a playoff spot. I think there's been a lot that's been learned this year, and Leo Carlsson is really starting to show what he can do. The future's really, really bright for Leo Carlsson in the National Hockey League, and I think for Mason McTavish as well, and other guys on that team. Number 22, dropping 3 spots from last week, the New York Islanders. The Islanders have had a tough time of it this week. Who hasn't in that chase for that final playoff spot in the East? But for the New York Islanders, I don't know what it is with these teams in the East. Every time a team has a chance to grab that spot, they go, nah. No thanks. So they almost came back in that game today against Tampa, but they didn't. And so, yeah, the Islanders 22nd on the board this week. Number 21, moving up 4 spots from last week, Columbus. They lost tonight, but they had a good week. And a good week in relation to other teams on this board. That's how the moving up and moving down works. They gave it a pretty good effort against Ottawa. Ottawa gets the 2 points tonight. For Columbus, they're still in the hunt. They are absolutely still in the hunt. There's still a chance that before the playoffs start that I'll have the flag up there for the Columbus Blue Jackets. I'll probably put that flag up for the video I do on the Blue Jackets missing the playoffs if they do fall short anyways. But yeah, Columbus has been a good story this year. And a very difficult year, a good story at the same time. Number 20, dropping 4 spots from last week, Utah. Utah, the bottom's just dropped out for them. What's weird to me with Utah is, so early on in the season, like the first couple weeks, they could score in bunches. They were fun to watch. And then all of a sudden, it was gone. Then over a stretch, I want to say February, early March, they were fun, they were scoring, they looked good. And now over the last week or so, they can't score. So I don't know what it is with Utah and consistency, but that ultimately I think is what's cost them playoffs, is that consistency. And that was an issue in Arizona as well. So while the team's got this new feeling and there's this optimism around the franchise, it is a similar story to one told by Arizona. You're in the hunt, and then all of a sudden, you're not. So, yeah, Utah number 20 this week and 11 points back of a playoff spot. Number 19, moving up 2 spots from last week, Vancouver. Canucks had a decent week. Yes, they blew that 3-goal lead against Columbus. But considering all of the distractions and everything going on around the team and the players that are missing right now, I think they're doing all right. I think the Canucks are doing all right. So they move up a couple of spots. I still don't think they make the playoffs. I just don't see there being a route for them to make the playoffs. I have seen Canuck fans in the comments with their fan fiction on how the Canucks can make the playoffs. I mean, at this point, short of them adding Mothra to the lineup and being allowed to, get Mothra out, I don't even know how he'd fit in the arena, but maybe if they recruit Mothra, maybe the Canucks can, and if he can come Mothra skate? Would it matter? Because he can fly. I think that's against the rules. So I'm just going to go ahead and say Mothra's not joining the Canucks. Number 18, moving up 2 spots from last week, the New York Rangers. The Rangers currently occupy that final playoff spot, and I feel like saying by default. They beat the San Jose Sharks, and that's that. They're suddenly in that final playoff spot. Now, other teams in the chase have games in hand, but they'd have to win those games in hand, which teams don't seem to really want to do right now. It is bizarre to watch the East and see what's going on with that wild card hunt, but at this point, the Rangers have that spot. We'll see if they hold on to it. Number 17, dropping 3 spots from last week, Montreal. The Habs have lost 5 in a row. So right now, I believe they still have their destiny in their own hands. So if they win every game going forward, I think they're the team that makes it. And maybe they do. But they need to figure this out. They need to figure it out quickly. And tomorrow they're in Florida. Yeah, tomorrow morning they're in Florida. I don't like their chances because Florida needs that game in that hunt for first place. That is going to be quite the test for a Montreal team that has been failing some tests recently. So that's your bottom 2 rows. There's one team in the bottom 2 rows that is in the playoffs, which means there's a team in the top 16 that is not in the playoffs, and it's actually the team that's at 16th. Moving up 1 spot from last week, Calgary. The Flames are showing a lot of fight down the stretch. I don't think it's going to lead to an appearance in the playoffs. I think that St. Louis and Minnesota are just too far ahead to catch. I know they have games in hand, but you have to win the games in hand. You have to win those games in hand. You have to have a really good record. Games in hand are good for a team that has a good record, but for a team that's struggling, the games in hand don't necessarily add up. So for the Flames at this point, they're playing well enough that I think they'd be a playoff team in the East, but that's just me. And just looking at the Turtle Derby in the East, Calgary would probably come out ahead of some of those teams right now. Number 15, dropping 2 spots from last week, Minnesota. So minor move down for Minnesota. They lost a game tonight against the New Jersey Devils. They didn't look great in that game against the New Jersey Devils either. Minnesota's now been caught by this team here, St. Louis, who I'm wearing. And so for the Minnesota Wild, they're looking at a likely first-round exit. I'm rooting for them to play Winnipeg. I've talked about this in other videos recently, but it's always fun for my wife when Minnesota plays Winnipeg. I think a Minnesota-Winnipeg first round could be fun, and who knows, it could go on for a while. Minnesota is a team that could be dangerous come playoff time if they're healthy. If you're a Wild fan, you might be laughing at me saying if they're healthy, and I'm sorry. Number 14, moving up 4 spots from last week, New Jersey. Devils had a decent week, not a great week, but a decent week. And so they find themselves back up into the top 2 rows. They're back up to 14th. The win over the Minnesota Wild tonight makes them move up that far. So, the win over Minnesota, a good win to get and an important win to get because while they don't really have any pressure from teams beneath them, you don't want to go into the playoffs playing as badly as they've been playing. So maybe this is a sign that they're ready to start, getting things together and winning some games down the stretch, to at least have it where not 100% of people are going to pick Carolina in that series in the first round. Number 13, dropping 4 spots from last week, Edmonton. The Oilers, they get the win tonight over Calgary, much needed. They also got Draisaitl back. If they didn't get Draisaitl back, I don't think they would have won that game against Calgary. They should be getting McDavid back between now and the next power rankings. That should help as well. We'll see if Stuart Skinner makes his return too. Pickard was good for Edmonton tonight, so that's important. Goaltending's been shaky at times. That's a big question mark for this team as the playoffs loom 3 weeks from tonight. But yeah, the Oilers, number 13 on the board this week. Number 12, dropping 1 spot from last week, the Kings. The Kings lost back-to-back games, and I'm not saying there's any reason for any kind of concern or anything, but they dropped 1 spot to 12th. I know there was some discussion about where I had them drop last week. They drop again this week, but there are a lot of teams with really strong records right now, and it really is kind of splitting hairs once you get into the top 10 with power rankings. So, because there's always going to be fans of a team go, nope, my team should be at this, and then I get it. Part of the reason I do power rankings is for my arguments with other power rankings that I saw. back 7-8 years ago. Number 11, dropping one spot as well from last week, Ottawa. They lost against Buffalo this week. That dropped them down. The rest of the week kept them from dropping further. In fact, pushed them up a little bit. So they end up just dropping the one spot from last week. The good news for Ottawa is they're still in the top 2 rows, and they look like they're going to be in the playoffs this year, which is great. I think that getting Ottawa back into the playoffs is awesome. That's why I'm kind of rooting for Montreal too. It'd be great to see Montreal and Ottawa get those final 2 wildcard spots. At least Ottawa's playing well to hold that wildcard spot. That's important. Number 10, moving up 2 spots from last week. I debated about Toronto. They did come back against San Jose. They ultimately lost that in a shootout. Shootouts I treat like ties. They did come back in that one. And then they won in LA tonight. Not very many teams win in LA. Now tomorrow, they're in Anaheim. So that game in Anaheim is important for Toronto because if they come out against Anaheim and they don't look good, they will likely drop down maybe to 12th, maybe to 11th. Anaheim has been a tough team to beat at times this year. That's why they're not in the bottom row. But for Toronto, they're number 10. They are still first in the division at this point in time. Number 9, moving up 6 spots from last week, St. Louis. The Blues, almost top row. Almost. And I will not be surprised if St. Louis is in the top row next week. The Blues have been just skyrocketing up the power rankings. They are playing so well. And I think after that win tonight against Colorado, well, this afternoon, yesterday, hockey went forever today. But after that win over Colorado, I think that'll silence some that have been wondering, well, is their schedule really that difficult? Who have they beat? Yeah, they just beat the Avs in Denver. And I don't think St. Louis has given up on the idea of, hey, why don't we just catch Colorado while we're at it? If they don't lose another game from here, it could happen. I don't think it does, but hey, it always could. So we'll see what they do. All right, let's move into the top row, shall we? Number 8 this week, same spot as last week, Carolina. Carolina, not a bad week. Not a fantastic week, I think, either. So same spot as last week for Carolina. I know there was some consternation about last week being number 8. I don't think I'll have that same thing this week. They did lose against Nashville, but they played well in that game against Nashville. So, see, I didn't move them down when they lost against Nashville. Number 7, because they played well. Number 7, dropping 1 spot from last week because they got passed, and that's Florida. Florida Panthers, I believe 6-4 in their last 10, and they're in the midst of that fight with Toronto and Tampa for that number 1 spot in the division that could come down to the final weekend of the season. Well, final week of the season, because it doesn't end on a weekend. But yeah, the Florida Panthers, number 7 this week. I still wouldn't want to play them in the playoffs. Number 6, dropping 1 spot from last week as well, Tampa. Tampa's winning. Tampa's been winning. They've won a lot. But there's a team that passed them. There's just a team I felt like this week had a fantastic week. Passes both Vegas and the Florida Panthers. So Tampa just drops the 1 spot. And it is Vegas that moves up the 2 spots to the number 5 spot on the board. I did the video on Vegas yesterday, and ta-da! It had no effect on Vegas's results. They won back-to-back games. So, I always find it funny when people are like, oh, he's just jinxed us. It's not a thing. I know that losing streak, winning streak videos, that you'll see a team that's on a winning streak lose, or vice versa, but that's because that's just how things work, and especially in a league with as much parity as the NHL has. But yeah, Vegas is playing really, really well right now. They're firing in all cylinders. They're starting to get that goaltending they need. I did that video on Vegas showing just how well they've played this month. They're not going to be an easy out in the playoffs either. Number 4, dropping 1 spot from last week. But if we get Vegas and St. Louis in the first round, I think all of us win. Number 4, dropping 1 spot from last week, Colorado. The Avs have been very good. They also lost at home against St. Louis, as previously stated. So that drops them down 1 spot because there is a bewildering team that's moved up to 3rd spot. And I would love to stand here and tell you how. I would love to stand here and tell you how Dallas won their games this week. I don't know. I feel like Dallas got outplayed in every game this week, but they're winning. I believe it's 4 wins in a row they have now, or 5 wins they have in a row. So I'm not going to move them down. Colorado loses, so Dallas moves up past Colorado in a game that I thought St. Louis played masterfully in Denver. But Dallas can't play that way in the playoffs, or they're not going to last, especially against Colorado. If we get Dallas and Colorado, and if Dallas plays the way they have on this road trip against Colorado, they don't beat Colorado playing that way. So I have no idea what to expect in that very, very likely first round, but Dallas keeps winning. They just keep winning. And I really wish that I could explain this in some way that makes... That's why I'm not doing the records over the last 10, because Dallas's record over their last 10 is really good, and it's a head-scratcher. Bit of a head-scratcher for me. The goaltenders have definitely helped. DeSmith has definitely helped, and Ottinger was very good tonight when he needed to be as well. Number 2 this week. Dropping one spot from last week, Washington. Not dropping them more than one spot, because I cannot put Dallas ahead of Washington. I think the board would completely engulf in flames if I put Dallas ahead of Washington right now. I really do. I think that's what would happen. Washington, bit of a rough week, but this is kind of what I had expected of the top teams down the stretch. They don't have any pressure from teams beneath them in the standings. And so that motivation, that fight that you see from the top teams, it's easy for them not to be as motivated and to kind of start thinking ahead to the playoffs when you're this close to the playoffs. And they're still, 11 points ahead of Carolina atop the division? They don't care about the President's Trophy. So for Washington, if they lose some games down the stretch, it's not a big deal. It does drop them down on the power rankings, but it all resets when we get to the playoffs. Which means number 1, back at number 1. Moving up one spot, Winnipeg's back. They're back at number 1. The Winnipeg Jets have been number 1 on this board more than half the season. And so for the Winnipeg Jets, I think they face the most pressure this team has ever had in their entire history. And I'll be very interested to see, once the playoffs get started 3 weeks from tonight, how they respond to that pressure. How this team embraces it, how this team goes through the process of being the favorite in the West. A situation that Winnipeg's never really been in before. The closest I can think of is back in 2018, when they were sandwiched right behind Nashville, who won the President's Trophy, and then they beat Nashville in that second round. And so there was some pressure on them in that series against Vegas in the conference final, which ultimately they lost. So for the Winnipeg Jets, from here, the only thing that they can do to really, get everybody all excited, win the Stanley Cup. Simple. You go out, you beat 4 teams, and you win the Stanley Cup. It is the hardest trophy to win, and yet when you look at it just on paper, you just have to beat 4 teams. You don't have to beat all 15. I don't see what the big difficulty is. I do. I totally get the difficulty. But the Winnipeg Jets, number 1 this week. There you go. They're back at number 1. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. It's greatly appreciated. Even those who just come in to watch the Power Rankings once a week to tell me how all of them are in the wrong spot. Thank you for that. I will talk to you again soon.